The day of the will reading arrived with a mix of uneasy anticipation and a palpable tension that seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. The meeting had been planned weeks ahead, and family members were summoned to a law firm's office, a place that felt cold and unfamiliar, far from the comfort of a family home. The office was decorated in a classic, somewhat austere style, with dark polished wood furniture and rows of law books lining the shelves, lending an air of gravity to the space. The lighting was soft but sufficiently bright, casting gentle shadows that seemed to accentuate the nerves visible on the faces around the large oval table set in the center of the room. I arrived several minutes early, heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity, anxiety, and a vague sense of dread about what the reading might reveal. Around me, other family members began to assemble, people I had not seen in a long time or had only fleeting contact with. Some greeted each other with tentative smiles or nods, but most wore expressions that were guarded and serious, betraying the complex emotions simmering beneath the surface. The cousin who would later scoff with the words, "You'll get nothing," appeared particularly self-assured, his smirk hinting at a confidence that bordered on arrogance. The air was thick with unspoken histories, old grievances, alliances, and resentments that had been carefully hidden or left to smolder quietly over the years. Whispers and low murmurings floated here and there among the group, but no one dared to speak loudly or to break the solemnity of the occasion. The tension was almost tangible, as if the slightest provocation could spark an outburst. Some held tightly onto small items, like a folded handkerchief or a piece of jewelry, as if grounding themselves against the storm of emotions that might soon erupt. Eventually, the lawyer arrived. He was an imposing figure, dressed immaculately in a dark suit, his appearance crisp and professional. His face was expressionless but not unkind, and his voice had a measured calmness that immediately drew everyone's focus. He greeted the family members politely but with a firm tone that conveyed the seriousness of the moment. After a brief introduction of the legal procedure, he reminded us all that the contents of the will represented the final wishes of the deceased and that those wishes were to be respected, regardless of personal feelings. As he prepared to begin, the lawyer adjusted his glasses and shuffled through a stack of papers resting on the table before him. There was a collective intake of breath around the room. Each person leaned slightly forward, eyes fixed on the lawyer or on the document in his hands, silently urging time to move faster and slower at once. The weight of expectation was overwhelming. This moment would confirm some hopes and shatter others, potentially rewriting the story of our family legacy. Around me, subtle shifts in body language betrayed the growing anxiety. Fingers drummed nervously on the table, feet shifted under chairs, and eyes darted toward one another in search of silent reassurance or challenge. The cousin with the confident smirk appeared almost defiant, crossing his arms and tapping his fingers as if daring the will to contradict his assumptions. Others looked down, avoiding eye contact, silently bracing themselves for bad news. Despite the tension, the room retained a veneer of civility. No raised voices or harsh words had yet been spoken, but the undercurrent suggested that it might only take one sharp sentence or one particularly surprising clause in the will to change that. Family members swallowed hard, glancing occasionally at old photographs displayed on the walls, memories of gatherings long past, of the deceased in happier times, reminding everyone that beneath the legalities, this was still a family bound by shared history and loss. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The lawyer adjusted his papers once more and began to speak. The room fell into a heavy silence, every word about to tip the fragile balance between expectation and reality. The reading of the will was not just a legal formality. It was a moment loaded with emotions, secrets, and the chance for new beginnings, or deepened divides. In those minutes before the reading officially began, the quiet was filled with everything that had led us there. Years of family stories, rivalry, loyalty, and love, all poised to unfold through the words that would soon be spoken. The gathering was more than an event. It was the turning point that would redefine relationships and legacies for all of us. The lawyer's voice broke the silence, clear and deliberate, as he began to reveal the contents of the will. Each clause, each word, resonated deeply in the room. The formal tone of his reading contrasted sharply with the rising emotional undercurrents that began to ripple through the family. As he read, eyes scanned the page intently, searching for familiar names, possessions, or sums of money. An unspoken calculation seemed to be playing out in everyone's mind, weighing the promises and disappointments that the words carried. Murmurs of confusion or surprise were suppressed, but the subtle quickening of breath, the tightening of jaws, and occasional glances exchanged said more than any words could. The cousin's earlier smirk began to fade as the revelations unfolded. His confident posture grew rigid, his smug expression replaced with a flicker of unease that betrayed how unexpected or unwelcome the news was to him. Meanwhile, other family members sat straighter, some blinking rapidly to hold back tears, others exchanging furtive looks of shock or disbelief. For some, the reading confirmed their hopes, validating years of expectation. For others, it shattered illusions and brought raw feelings to the surface. At one point, the lawyer paused, adjusting his glasses as he reached a particularly significant section of the document. He looked up, his eyes briefly meeting mine, then quickly returning to the papers. It was then that I noticed the small slip of paper he had discreetly slid toward me just before the reading began, a detail I had almost dismissed in the tension of the moment. Now, the significance of that gesture became clear. This was not an ordinary will reading. There was more at stake, more unfolding behind the scenes that was destined to change the trajectory of my place within this family and its legacy. As the reading continued, the lawyer detailed the distribution of tangible assets, property, family heirlooms, bank accounts. Each item drew reactions, some subtle, others barely contained. The room's temperature seemed to rise with the mounting emotional overload. Relatives shifted uncomfortably, some whispering prayers or words of encouragement to themselves. The air was thick not just with the smell of old paper and polished wood, but with the heavy weight of unresolved conflicts now being brought into the open. Near the end of the reading, the lawyer addressed the more personal bequests. Gifts meant to symbolize affection or recognition rather than market value. These moments were perhaps the most poignant. The heartfelt, unexpected acts of remembrance from the deceased that revealed their true feelings and hopes for reconciliation or gratitude. Some family members' eyes softened, while others stiffened, the complexities of these gestures piercing deeper than any financial implication. When the reading finally drew to a close, there was a heavy pause in the room. The lawyer folded the documents carefully and pushed them across the table. Silence enveloped everyone as the gravity of what had just been revealed settled. The family sat, some leaning back, some with heads bowed, and some staring straight ahead, trying to process the mixture of emotions boiling inside. That moment marked the true beginning of a new chapter. A chapter defined not just by legal decisions, but by how each of us would navigate the shifting alliances, disappointments, and hopes laid bare by the will. The reading was over, but the real challenge, the living legacy of our family, was only just beginning to unfold. The lawyer cleared his throat, signaling that the reading was about to formally begin. He opened the folder in front of him and carefully unfolded the will, its crisp pages symbolizing the final testament left by our departed relative. As he adjusted his glasses, a hush fell over the room. The anticipation was nearly suffocating. Every eye was fixed on him, every ear strained for the first words that would reveal the true extent of the inheritance. He started by recounting the opening statements that confirmed the authenticity of the document and affirmed the intentions of the testator. His voice was steady and deliberate, carrying the weight of authority that demanded immediate attention and respect. The lawyer read aloud each section with precision, ensuring that no nuance was missed, as this reading was not just a formality. It was a legal declaration that could alter the course of our family's future. As the document unfolded, the details emerged. Properties, accounts, cherished possessions, and unexpected clauses. The lawyer's tone remained measured, but beneath the surface, the reactions from the room grew more palpable. A gasp here, a sharp intake of breath there, but mostly, an intense silence as each individual tried to fathom the significance of what was being revealed. Some leaned in closer, while others leaned back in disbelief. At one point, The cousin who had earlier smirked shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His confidence began to waver visibly as the lawyer read passages that contradicted his earlier assumption. The lawyer's calm reading style only heightened the tension. There was no commentary, no explanation beyond the words on the page. The facts themselves were causing tremors within the group. Throughout the reading, the lawyer maintained a professional demeanor, pausing only to clarify legal jargon or to emphasize specific bequests. It was clear to everyone that his role was impartial, a guardian of the deceased's wishes rather than an advocate for any party. His slowness in turning each page seemed deliberately paced, making every moment stretch just long enough to allow thoughts and emotions to simmer beneath the surface. When the lawyer reached a critical clause that directly addressed my share of the inheritance, I felt a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. The reading was my first opportunity to grasp the reality of the situation not just through words but also by witnessing the reactions around me. The lawyer's voice, calm and unwavering, carried the message that while some family members expected a certain outcome, the will had charted a different path. As the reading neared its end, the lawyer warned the family that there might be questions during the discussion phase afterward, but urged patience and respect. He carefully folded the document and closed the folder, marking the conclusion of the official reading. The moment signaled the transition from hearing the facts to confronting the feelings and potential conflicts those facts had unearthed. The room remained silent for a few heartbeat moments before murmurs and uneasy glances began to surface. The reading was over, but the real challenge, interpreting the will's impact and navigating the family dynamics it ignited, had only just begun. As the family members slowly started to break the silence, conversations grew increasingly earnest and emotionally charged. Some voices were barely above a whisper, while others spoke with a biting edge, revealing the undercurrent of long-held frustrations now bubbling to the surface. The lawyer, sensing the shifting mood, remained poised but prepared to intervene if discussions became too heated. The cousin who had earlier dismissed my chance at any inheritance now attempted to reclaim control of the narrative. His remarks were laced with defensiveness, subtly challenging the legitimacy of certain clauses or hinting at possible errors. Yet, his efforts only fueled the simmering tensions. Others, who had seemed quieter before, found their voices and began to express relief, gratitude, or confusion. The room was no longer just a venue for a reading. It was a crucible where years of relationships were testing their resilience. I kept my attention partly on the family's reactions and partly on the confidential papers in my hands. The knowledge they contained was a powerful, if hidden, key, one that might explain or even rewrite parts of the story that the lawyer had just publicly revealed. A quiet weighing of options took place inside me. Should I reveal this information now and risk upheaval, or should I wait until I fully understood its implications? While the discussions unfolded, the lawyer stepped in to clarify legal terms and explain procedural questions, helping to temper some misunderstandings. His reminders that the will represented the deceased's final wishes and that any contestations would require proper legal channels seemed to momentarily recalibrate the room's focus. Gradually, the family members began to settle into uneasy acceptance. The initial shock gave way to a complex mixture of resignation, tentative planning, and cautious hope. Some exchanged tentative words of reconciliation. Others retreated into silence or private conversations elsewhere in the building. The event, which had started as a formal legal procedure, was transforming into a pivotal turning point for the family's future dynamics. I felt the weight of the moment keenly, knowing that the legacy left behind was not just about material possessions but also about the ties that bound or divided us. The will reading had exposed vulnerabilities, ambitions, and truths that would shape our interactions for years to come. As I looked at the faces around me, some hopeful, some guarded, some hurt, I understood that this gathering was more than a distribution of assets. It was an unveiling of family history, a reckoning with the past, and a test of our capacity to move forward together or apart. With the reading concluded and initial reactions voiced, the next chapter began. Navigating the aftermath, making decisions, and confronting the realities revealed. The lawyer packed up his documents, preparing to leave, but it was clear that for the family, this day marked the beginning of a long, complex journey, one that would demand courage, patience, and sometimes difficult conversations. The story of the will was behind us now, but the living reality it created was just unfolding. As the lawyer meticulously gathered his papers and prepared to depart, a palpable shift settled over the room. The intense energy that had dominated during the reading began to wane, transforming into a quieter, more contemplative atmosphere. Family members, once frozen in anticipation, now found themselves struggling to reconcile the heavy truths they had just confronted. Some remained seated, hesitant to move or speak, while others quietly rose, exchanging awkward nods or whispered farewells before dispersing. The sterile law office, once merely a venue, had become a crucible where the raw edges of family dynamics were exposed. The cousin whose earlier smirk had embodied confidence and disdain now sat withdrawn and tight-lipped. His smugness dissolved into a guarded wariness, his eyes scanning the room with careful calculation. From his posture and the subtle tension in his jaw, it was clear the reading had seriously unsettled him. The certainty he had exuded before was now replaced by a flicker of doubt and frustration. I noted how he stole glances toward me, as if attempting to measure the impact of the revelations on my own demeanor. This unspoken contest between us was charged, those small shifts in gaze and posture signaling a deeper, ongoing struggle for influence and recognition within the family. Around the table, the reactions remained varied and complex. Some family members' faces bore the tired, somber gravity of disappointment. Others seemed faintly relieved or vindicated. There were people with moist eyes, struggling to hold back tears stirred not by inheritance amounts but by the weight of symbolism, the final acknowledgments, the silent reconciliations, or the painful omissions inscribed in those pages. Those personal bequests, while modest in value, carried profound emotional resonance, unveiling the departed's true sentiments and the lingering hopes or regrets for the relationships left behind. The lawyer, ever professional, offered a measured invitation for questions or clarifications. His voice, though calm, carried a hint of caution, as though anticipating the emotional stakes emerging beneath the surface. Family members huddled in quiet conversations, weighing their words, their voices a blend of hesitation, accusation, and reflection. The reading had not just disclosed a distribution of assets. It had reignited old rivalries, unearthed unresolved grievances, and challenged entrenched alliances. Whispers about fairness, legacy, and the legitimacy of certain clauses drifted through the room, some tinged with disbelief, others with resentment. I held in my hands the confidential papers the lawyer had discreetly slipped to me before the reading, documents that had not been openly shared. This unexpected possession gave me a silent power, a secret knowledge that could alter the family's understanding of the will's true meaning. I felt the heavy responsibility of this hidden information pressing down on me. Should I reveal these details immediately and risk further upheaval? Or would discretion and patience be wiser, allowing me to fully grasp their implications before acting? This internal debate added a new layer of tension, a private struggle within the communal unrest. As conversations deepened, it became clear that the will reading was only the overture to a broader, more complex drama. Business details, property divisions, bank accounts, and inheritances were now entwined with emotional reckonings. Some relatives tentatively reached out, offering tentative apologies or expressions of empathy, while others retreated into silence or private rooms to nurse fresh wounds. The formal legal exercise had morphed into an emotional reckoning, challenging each of us to confront not just material legacies, but the intangible bonds and fractures that defined our family. I observed the subtle choreography of this fraught scene. Hardened faces softened in moments of vulnerability. Old grudges mingled awkwardly with tentative gestures toward reconciliation. The will reading had served as a catalyst to bring hidden truths into the open, revealing vulnerabilities that many had long guarded. It was a reminder that legacies extend beyond dollars and deeds. They reach into the very core of identity, memory, and shared history. Moments stretched as the family began to process what had been revealed. There was no immediate resolution, only the slow, sometimes painful work of untangling emotions and practicalities. Plans for future meetings, legal consultations, and mediation floated on strained conversations, signaling the beginning of what promised to be a prolonged negotiation of relationships and assets. As I finally rose to leave, the weight of the day's revelations pressed upon me. The sun outside dipped low, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like the complicated legacy before us. Deep, intricate, and uncertain. The reading had closed a chapter on the deceased's life, but it had also opened a vast, unwritten chapter for all of us still living under the weight of that legacy. Walking out of the building, I felt the dual surge of burden and possibility. The will was more than a document. It was a narrative, a map of our family's past and future conflicts, hopes, and heartbreaks. The journey ahead would be complex, fraught with difficult conversations and emotional challenges. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was a flicker of hope that through this reckoning, we might rediscover a path toward understanding, healing, or at least coexistence. The lawyer's presence faded behind me as dusk settled, but the real story, the living legacy of love, loss, justice, and family, had only just begun to unfold. The challenges were now ours to face, and the decisions to come would shape not only the division of belongings but the very fabric of who we would become as a family moving forward. The reading was over, but the journey was just beginning. The days that followed the will reading were marked by a slow unraveling of conversations, emotions, and plans that had long been dormant. Messages were exchanged cautiously, with some family members reaching out to discuss next steps or seek support, while others retreated into silence, overwhelmed by the impact of the revelations. The confidential documents I held became a silent presence, influencing my perspective and decisions as I weighed when and how to bring them into the open. Meetings were scheduled, not only with lawyers but also with mediators and financial advisors. The cold, clinical process of dividing assets blended uneasily with the warmth and rawness of human emotions. Property appraisals and bank statements shared the agenda with family histories, apologies, and charges of fairness. Each interaction tested the nerves and patience of everyone involved, forcing us to confront not just legal rights but also personal bonds and past wounds. Some relatives found moments to connect beyond the tension. Shared memories surfaced, old jokes were tentatively revisited, and occasional smiles broke through. These fragile signs of healing, however, were counterbalanced by moments of discord, arguments over interpretations, feelings of exclusion, or accusations of manipulation. The legacy of the will was not merely the sum of material possessions but a complex narrative where love, resentment, and ambition intertwined. Throughout this process, I remained conscious of the additional information in the confidential papers. Choosing when and how to reveal their contents became a delicate balancing act. Trust was fragile, and any misstep could widen divides. Yet, withholding the truth weighed heavily on me, an ethical compass guiding each decision. The experience underscored how a will can be far more than a legal instrument. It can serve as a mirror reflecting the nuances of family life, the battles fought in private, and the hopes for the future. It challenged us to accept difficult truths, to negotiate not only the division of possessions but also the redefinition of relationships. As weeks turned into months, the family slowly forged a new path, learning to accommodate the realities imposed by the will and the emotions it stirred. The legacy was no longer fixed in paper but lived in the ongoing interactions, the efforts to reconcile, and the memories that bound us, imperfect, resilient, and evolving. The reading was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. In the weeks and months following the will reading, the family found itself navigating a complex and often turbulent process that extended far beyond the mere distribution of material possessions. The initial shockwaves that had reverberated through the room during the reading slowly transformed into a series of practical and deeply personal challenges. Legal procedures demanded attention. Bank accounts needed to be settled, properties divided or sold, debts accounted for, and tax considerations addressed. But alongside these administrative necessities, the family members were forced to grapple with far more elusive and fragile matters: trust, forgiveness, identity, and the redefinition of relationships. During this period, many family members experienced a profound reevaluation of what family truly meant. Old wounds reopened as unresolved grievances surfaced, But there were also opportunities for healing and connection. Conversations that had previously been avoided or suppressed began tentatively, sometimes awkwardly, but often with a surprising earnestness. The shared experience of loss, combined with the necessity of cooperation, created spaces where even the most fractured relationships tentatively reached toward reconciliation. The confidential documents that the lawyer had discreetly passed to me before the reading played a pivotal and sensitive role in this process. These papers contained details that added nuance and depth to the publicly read will, private instructions, codicils, or conditions that illuminated the deceased's intentions in ways that were not obvious at first glance. I understood that handling this information with care was essential. The timing and manner of its disclosure could either help mend bridges or exacerbate existing tensions. When I eventually chose to share these documents with select family members, the repercussions were significant. The revelations brought clarity to some misunderstandings, providing context that explained decisions and alleviated suspicions of favoritism or neglect. In other cases, new conflicts arose, fueled by differing interpretations or feelings of exclusion from the inner circle of information. These moments of discord, while painful, also forced the family to confront uncomfortable truths and engage in difficult but necessary conversations. The legacy of the will took on symbolic as well as practical meaning. It became a powerful narrative that shaped how each family member understood their place within the family history. A story that intertwined love, resentment, gratitude, and regret. It underscored that inheritance is never solely about financial or physical assets. It encompasses memory, identity, and the responsibility to carry forth the values and hopes of those who came before. Throughout this time, the process of managing the inheritance became a metaphor for the family's ongoing journey toward healing and growth. Legal meetings, mediation sessions, and financial discussions were interspersed with moments of emotional vulnerability, shared tears, whispered apologies, and small gestures of kindness. Progress was uneven and often slowed by fears, wounds, and misunderstandings. Yet, amid the turmoil, glimmers of hope gradually emerged. Some family members found renewed purpose in preserving family heritage or committing to mutual support. Others discovered within themselves the courage to forgive and rebuild connections once thought irreparable. This ongoing evolution demonstrated that family, at its core, is not a static construct but a living, dynamic network shaped by experiences and choices. Relationships that had frayed or been distant were given new life. Others remained fragile or, in some instances, permanently altered. The will reading, with its legal finality, marked a critical turning point, but it was in the everyday interactions afterward, the conversations over holidays, the shared responsibility for ancestral homes, the quiet moments of understanding, that the real work of honoring legacy unfolded. Reflecting on all that transpired, I came to see that the will was more than a document dictating the distribution of assets. It was a catalyst that forced us to confront our family's history, values, and unresolved tensions. It demanded honesty, patience, and a willingness to embrace complexity. It also presented an invitation to choose how we would carry our family forward, balancing respect for the past with openness to transformation. The journey we embarked on after that will reading was unpredictable and, at times, overwhelming, but it was also deeply meaningful. It reiterated that legacy is lived, not just inherited, that it is shaped by how we respond to loss, navigate conflict, and nurture connection. In embracing this challenge, we honored not only the memory of the deceased but also the continuing story of who we are and who we might become. The initial will reading was a profound moment of transition, a marked ending, but it was simultaneously a threshold to new beginnings. As days turned to months, and months to years, the family continued to write this evolving narrative, informed by the legal document but animated by human experience. The story of the will was just the beginning. The true legacy lay in our shared efforts to heal, understand, and grow. As the years unfolded, the impact of the will reading continued to resonate within our family, shaping both individual lives and collective dynamics in ways few could have predicted at the outset. What began as a formal legal proceeding had blossomed into a long-term journey of transformation, marked by cycles of reconciliation, challenge, and growth. The complexities of managing the physical and financial estate gradually gave way to deeper reflections about identity, belonging, and the meaning of family itself. Family gatherings evolved from tense affairs overshadowed by inheritance disputes into opportunities for shared remembrance, dialogue, and celebration of the bonds that endured despite hardship. While some relationships had fractured beyond repair, others strengthened, forged from the crucible of shared pain and vulnerability. The lessons learned in those difficult months after the reading became guiding principles for how we approached conflicts and joys alike. Communication, empathy, and honesty emerged as vital foundations, supported by a newfound respect for the diverse experiences and perspectives each member brought. During moments of tension, we frequently recalled that day's raw exposure of truth as a reminder that avoidance served no one. Facing reality, however uncomfortable, was the path toward healing. The presence of the confidential documents initially entrusted to me also took on symbolic significance. They represented, in a way, the twofold nature of legacy, visible and invisible, explicit and implied. Much like family itself, legacy contained layers, some shared openly, others held privately, each necessary for the whole. Through careful stewardship of this knowledge, I came to realize that honoring legacy meant balancing transparency with discretion, power with responsibility. Over time, the family undertook various projects to preserve and commemorate our heritage. From maintaining ancestral homes to compiling a written history, these efforts fostered connection across generations and instilled a collective sense of purpose. The will's directives, once points of contention, became guidelines for stewardship, both material and emotional, that helped ground us amid change. Looking back, it was clear that the will reading was never merely about inheritance or possessions. It was a profound moment of reckoning, an unveiling of truths both painful and hopeful. The process challenged us to confront our past honestly, to embrace complexity, and to choose intentionally how to move forward. It tested bonds, stirred emotions, and ultimately created space for redefinition and renewal. This ongoing story, marked by endings and beginnings, is a testament to the enduring power of family and the legacies we inherit and create. While the legal documents set the structure, it was our actions, conversations, and decisions that breathed life into its words. The will reading may have been the starting point, but it was the collective journey afterward that truly shaped who we became, individually and together. In the end, the inheritance was more than property or money. It was the legacy of love, loss, resilience, and hope. It was the challenge to reconcile the past with the future, to hold each other accountable, and to nurture the ties that bind. As we continued this journey, we carried with us both the memories of what had been and the promise of what might still be, ever aware that the true measure of legacy lies not in what we receive but in how we live it forward. In the years and even decades that followed that defining will reading, I came to appreciate the profound and multifaceted impact it had not only on my family as a collective but also on me personally. The experience proved to be far more than a mere legal proceeding. It was, in many ways, a crucible that transformed relationships, reshaped identities, and redefined what it meant to inherit a legacy. The confidential documents, the discreet papers slipped to me by the lawyer, remained a silent yet powerful undercurrent throughout this time. They were more than just addenda to the will. They contained nuanced and sometimes surprising details about intentions that went beyond material distributions. Holding this knowledge reminded me of the delicate balance between transparency and discretion. It was a constant ethical challenge to determine when and how to share these revelations without causing unnecessary harm, while also ensuring that the family understood the full picture. This stewardship of information grew into a quiet responsibility that shaped many of my decisions and interactions. As I reflected on all that had transpired, I realized that the inheritance I had received was not confined to physical or financial assets. It was a gift and a burden intertwined, one that involved the intangible legacies of trust, memory, forgiveness, and connection. I learned to value these as much as, if not more than, the concrete elements of the estate. This perspective shifted how I engaged with family members, encouraging empathy even in moments of tension and recognizing the complexity of pain and love woven through our shared history. The post-reading period ushered in a slow, often difficult process of healing and rebuilding. Family gatherings, once marked by awkward silences and veiled hostilities, gradually evolved into opportunities for genuine conversation and tentative reconciliation. These moments were precious and fragile, sometimes disrupted by setbacks, other times deepened by unexpected softness or shared joy. We began to confront the truths that the will had laid bare. Old resentments, hopes unspoken, misunderstandings deeply rooted. Legal and financial matters demanded ongoing attention, blending with these emotional undertakings. Working alongside lawyers, mediators, and financial experts, we navigated the technical realities of estate administration. However, it became increasingly clear that the heartbeat of this process was human, comprised of strained apologies, renewed hopes, and the laborious weaving of frayed ties. In this environment, I discovered the value of active, compassionate listening. It became essential to hold space for all voices, especially those expressing hurt or suspicion, while remaining grounded in the intention to foster unity and understanding. Patience became a necessary virtue, as healing was neither quick nor linear. Each day presented choices, to engage or withdraw, to speak or listen, to forgive or hold firm. These choices collectively shaped the evolving family narrative. Further, I embraced a role that extended beyond that of heir or stakeholder. I became a custodian of family history, a storyteller and listener tasked with preserving memories both joyful and painful, documenting our family's past, sharing stories across generations, and encouraging dialogue became acts of stewardship that helped repair and strengthen the bonds we shared. These efforts, small and ongoing, nurtured a sense of belonging and continuity that transcended the legal documents. Through it all, I came to understand that legacy is not static. It is a living, breathing phenomenon shaped by those who carry it forward. We inherit not only assets but also responsibilities, relationships, and memories. In honoring the legacy entrusted to us, we must wrestle with complexities of grief, power, gratitude, and sometimes anger, in order to embody the values and hopes of those who came before. The will reading, with all its formality and tension, was a pivotal moment, a closing of one chapter and the opening of another. But the real legacy lay in what followed, the everyday acts of connection, reconciliation, and renewal. It was in how we chose to live the aftermath, to build bridges where possible, and to accept the imperfect humanity of our family. As I carried forward this understanding, I embraced both the promise and the challenge inherent in legacy. It reminded me that being part of a family means engaging in a continuous narrative of loss and love, endings and beginnings. The story begun by the will reading remains unfinished, shaped daily by our choices, our forgiveness, and our commitment to one another. In this ongoing journey, I have learned that true inheritance is not measured by possessions but by the strength of the relationships we nurture and the depth of the compassion we extend. It is a testament to resilience, to hope, and to the enduring ties that bind us across time. And as we continue to navigate this shared path, we honor not only the past but also the possibilities of all the tomorrows to come. Over the years that followed that pivotal day of the will reading, the experience evolved into something far more profound and far-reaching than any of us had initially imagined. The legal reading, with its crisp pronouncements and measured tones, had been just the surface of a deeply emotional and transformative journey. A journey that reshaped our family, our understandings of each other, and our notions of legacy itself. Legacy, I came to understand more deeply, is not merely the transfer of wealth or property. It is the inheritance of memory, expectation, unresolved wounds, and hopes for the future. The will reading unveiled the tangible parts: houses, money, heirlooms, but it also laid bare the intangible: fractured relationships, unspoken regrets, and subtle longings for reconciliation. The legal ceremony was only the starting point for the far more challenging, ongoing process of facing these human realities. Central to this was the confidential knowledge entrusted to me, those secret clauses and private instructions the deceased had left behind but which were initially withheld from the rest of the family. Carrying this knowledge felt like holding a hidden dimension of the family story, one that could illuminate motivations and ease misunderstandings, but also had the power to ignite new tensions if mishandled. I grappled with this burden, learning the importance of patience, discernment, and compassion. It became clear that legacy requires not just information, but wisdom and tact in its sharing. Family interactions following the reading were complex and often fraught. What had been years, sometimes decades, of silence, misunderstanding, or even estrangement began to shift. Some relatives found reasons to reconnect, sharing memories and tentative apologies in quiet moments over meals or phone calls. Others remained distant, their wounds still raw or their memories too painful to revisit for now. The will reading was like a mirror reflecting both the beauty and blemishes of our shared past. Throughout this process, I discovered the vital role of communication, not only speaking honestly but listening deeply. I learned how essential it was to create spaces where everyone felt heard and valued, even when their views or feelings diverged sharply. This was no easy task. Emotions ran high, and old grievances flared. Yet, the willingness to engage respectfully became a foundation for healing that neither time nor material settlements could alone provide. Beyond the emotional and relational landscape, the practical realities of inheritance required navigation. Legal procedures demanded attention. Estate taxes, probate, transferring deeds, dividing tangible assets. Working with lawyers and mediators, we negotiated not just paperwork but fragile relationships. Financial discussions and family histories intertwined, challenging us to balance fairness with empathy. These mundane yet essential tasks were sometimes taxing but ultimately acted as necessary steps toward closure and new beginnings. In this period, I embraced my evolving role as more than just an heir. I became a steward of family memory and history, tasked with preserving stories, sharing wisdom, and fostering dialogue. Organizing family archives, documenting oral histories, and encouraging intergenerational conversations became acts of care and remembrance. These efforts offered opportunities to celebrate heritage while confronting difficult truths, reminding us that family legacies are living, breathing stories shaped by collective remembrance and choice. Gradually, the family found ways to honor the legacy beyond the will's material terms. We planned gatherings to commemorate our shared history, cared for ancestral homes, and established rituals of remembrance. These acts became spaces where past and present converged, a place to grieve, celebrate, and rebuild connections. The will reading was thus not an end, but a catalyst for ongoing renewal. Reflecting back, the event illuminated a profound truth. Legacy is inherently complex, multifaceted, and deeply human. It encompasses joy and sorrow, gifts and responsibilities, endings and beginnings. It challenges us to confront uncomfortable realities while holding on to hope for growth and reconciliation. It demands courage to face grief, to release old resentments, and to embrace the imperfect humanity of those we love. The will reading was a defining milestone, etched in memory as a moment laden with both finality and possibility. Yet it was the unfolding narrative afterward, the difficult conversations, gestures of kindness, moments of insight, that truly shaped what was inherited. We inherited not only possessions but the task of weaving a new family story, one shaped by resilience, love, and the conscious choices to honor both past and future. This ongoing journey reaffirmed that true legacy is not static but dynamic. It is the living dialogue between those who have gone before and those who remain, a thread woven through time by memory, intention, and action. It reminded me that inheritance is not simply received. It is carried forward by our decisions, our compassion, and our commitment to one another. In embracing this perspective, I found a deeper understanding of family and self. The will reading marked a profound threshold, but it was in the daily work afterward, in the listening, forgiving, remembering, and loving, that we gave meaning to what was bequeathed. And so, as life continues to unfold, I carry this legacy with reverence, knowing that it is not what we take from the past that defines us, but how we live it forward into the future.